In the past 2 years, I've been responsible for energy mines and petroleum resources. There's been 3 ministers. One, Richard Neufeld, went off to the Senate. The other, Blair Leckstrom, rode his Harley into the distance. And now, Bill Bennett has decided that he can't take any more of the bullying.
Good evening and welcome to Voice of BC. I'm Vaughn Palmer, and this is going to be one of those cut-to-the-chase introductions. Our guest tonight is former Cabinet Minister Bill Bennett, and we are taping the show on Wednesday, which is the day Mr. Bennett resigned / was fired from Cabinet, and I'm going to turn it over to him and get him to tell us what happened earlier today. Bill Bennett, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on.
Well, you're welcome. I can't say that it's really great to be here or anything under the circumstances, Mr. Palmer, but I do appreciate the opportunity to tell my story. I've known for about 3 weeks that I was very much on the edge in terms of the public comments that I'd made about the reorganization of the natural resource ministries back about 3 weeks ago at the time of the cabinet shuffle. And then more recently, my public comments about my belief that Premier Campbell should try and get out of the way as quickly as possible for the benefit of the BC Liberal Party and the province in general. Obviously, a politician doesn't come to that sort of decision easily. It's taken me 10 years basically to get to the point where I really felt like I just could not keep my comments inside the tent, as politicians are trained to do, and I understand some of my colleagues absolutely do not agree with me speaking out publicly, and I accept that. There are many of my colleagues, frankly, who have thanked me for saying the things that I've done. Today I went into a regularly scheduled cabinet meeting. I knew that I was out there in terms of having risked my position. And everyone was there. The Premier was there, and he suddenly got up and left the room. And the Deputy Premier said that he had talked. Yes, said that he had talked to colleagues in cabinet, and then they thought that I should leave. If they thought that I should leave, and they clearly did, at least the folks that he had talked to. And he didn't say who he had talked to, but he said that he talked to a majority of the cabinet, and they thought that I should leave. The reasons given were that I had broken the no surprises rule.
I didn't know there was a no surprises rule in cabinet. That means you're not supposed to do stuff without telling them what you're going to do.
Yes.
And what was the surprise?
Well, I mean, the surprise was the last 3 weeks, me speaking out and in my opinion, telling the truth.
You said the reorganization was done without you being consulted. Told why, or having it explained to you, and you were one of the ministries that was reorganized.
Yeah, I mean, it really is not really about me not being consulted. I mean, it would have been nice to have been consulted. It's more about, why wouldn't the ADM for mining have been consulted? Why weren't the deputy ministers consulted? Why weren't the stakeholders consulted? I mean, why wouldn't you go and talk to the mining industry? If you're going to change the ministries that deal with mining or oil and gas or forestry or whatever, why wouldn't you go and talk to those people and find out, what is your relationship like with these ministries? What can we do better? I was asked to sit on a committee that Minister Bell chairs. It was called, the Premier loves these, these slogans, one project, one process. It's kind of like the 5 great goals and the golden decade and the heartlands and all that stuff. So I was asked to sit on this committee chaired by Minister Bell, and it was called One Process, One Project. And at our very first meeting, I asked what I thought was a reasonable question: shouldn't we define the problem before we start to fix something? I didn't realize this. This was before the cabinet shuffle, but I didn't realize all the work on this had already been done.
Over 8 months.
Over 8 months. And
so that was one offense. You raised that.
Yes.
In public with that.
And deputy ministers were told, the 2 deputies that were involved in that process, Mr. Palmer, were told, and they have told me this, and I don't wish to get them into any trouble, but they were just being honest. They told me that they were instructed by the Premier's office not to tell anybody, but particularly ministers, that this process was going on. That is inexplicable.
That was surprise number 1, and you violated the rule by going public on that. What was the other thing you did that they told you was unacceptable?
They, Colin, who I have a lot of respect for, but he's a loyal soldier. He's doing what he's asked to do. he said that I'd broken cabinet confidentiality, and I have not. I'm talking about that sort of thing right now a little bit. He talked about it before I did today.
Yes.
He described the circumstances, and so he's basically started that. I don't really want to talk much about cabinet and caucus because we do have a rule. I had not broken any cabinet or caucus confidentiality. What I had done was I had criticized the premier, essentially. I had been trying to be as respectful as I could because I do believe that he will go down in history as one of the good premiers of the province. He won 3 terms. He turned the economy around. It's a shame that I find myself in this position right now, but like Van der Zandt before him and Glenn Clark before him, he just doesn't seem to know when to pull up stakes and move on. So
those are your 2 offenses.
Those are 2 offenses. Guilty of breaking the no surprises rule. Not guilty of breaking any cabinet confidentialities. I wasn't out there talking to the media about what we discussed in cabinet or in caucus. I was out there saying the premier should go.
Is there much of a discussion in cabinet on this, or what happens? They ask you to leave and you leave.
Yes, they asked me to leave, and I leave.
After how long? Like, how long did this take?
Oh, 2 minutes maybe.
Oh, really? So this wasn't a Bill, tell us where you're coming from. This was
no,
leave.
No.
So you leave.
Yeah.
They put out the story that you resigned. Somebody said that you resigned. Did you resign?
No. I decided 3 weeks ago when it just became too much. I mean, we all have our lines, and in politics, party politics, I mean, you swallow an awful lot, and that's part of the business. You got to be a big boy, and you got to go along with things. I mean, constantly we were doing things that I didn't really agree with, in particular political strategy. I'd lose lots of arguments, most of the arguments I made, and fine. You just eat it and you deal with it. But everyone, I think, must surely have a line that they can't cross, and you cross that line and you begin to worry about your own soul and whether you're selling your soul for this business, and do you can you still look at yourself in the mirror. So 3 weeks ago I got to the point where I wasn't prepared to swallow it any longer, and I really felt like the principle at stake was the survival of the BC Liberal Party, which is currently the coalition party that defeats the NDP if we're a coalition. And I thought that principle, that value, was more important than anything, including Gordon Campbell or Bill Bennett.
So they say that they tried to give the press the impression at midday Wednesday that not only did you resign, but that it was a cabinet decision to ask you to leave. So that in effect, cabinet had pushed you out. You were fired by whom?
Well, I'm pretty sure that the OIC, the Order in Council that takes me out as Minister of Energy, will be signed by none other than Gordon Campbell. I'm sure it won't be signed by Colin Hanson or anybody else at Cabinet. Look,
as indeed it was. You're right about that.
Well, okay.
I was able to confirm that late today, that in spite of the idea that it was Cabinet with the Premier out of the room that asks you to go, that Cabinet, in our system of government, as you know, as you said this afternoon, Premiers do the hiring and firing in Cabinet. That's how the Cabinet system works. And
right.
In this case, the Cabinet order terminating your appointment was signed by none other than Gordon Campbell.
Right. And his right to do so.
Yeah.
He's still Premier, and he wanted me out, and
You said, though, in the scrum this afternoon, you thought that whole thing with was staged, right? It's just that was just part of the show.
That was a bit like a PAB event, a public affairs event. It had that feel to it. It was set up, I think, by Paul Taylor, the Chief of Staff, and that was the way that they could protect the Premier, was by having it look like Cabinet was saying, we'll have to ask Bennett to leave, or we'll tell Bennett that he's going to leave, and then that takes the pressure off the Premier. Let there be no mistake, and I don't think there will be a mistake in the public mind. Gordon Campbell doesn't like criticism, and I guess none of us do. In fairness to Mr. Campbell, can you have a cabinet minister in your cabinet that's saying, you should leave? Perhaps not. So it was resolved today.
Tell me a little bit, and tell people watching a little bit, a couple of things that you talked about in the scrum. First of all, you mentioned in passing, I'd like to hear a little more about this, about the Premier's unilateral decision-making. You're not disputing his right to fire a cabinet minister, but you talked a little bit this afternoon, and maybe you can say a little more tonight, about the way the Premier makes decisions and then kind of springs them on even his cabinet ministers and caucus members, discover them without being consulted.
It's a real pattern, and I'm not convinced that you have to run a government this way.
Give a couple examples.
Well, okay, a couple of examples. The announcement that he made about the referendum vote 50+1, and if the public says no in this vote, those who decide to take the time to go out and vote, if they say no, we'll get rid of the HST. We just had a long discussion in Kelowna at a cabinet retreat. We never discussed that option. That option never came up. And he went out 2 days later and just made this arbitrary unilateral announcement, surprising everybody. And my colleagues are gonna, they're gonna say whatever they're gonna say, but they're all there and they all know that what I just said is true.
Another example?
Well, the 2005 election. I'm a rural guy. First Nations issues are a big deal where I come from. Access to the land and all the difficult, challenging issues that we have for each other, First Nations and non-First Nations people. I heard about the new relationship, the 6-page document that apparently the Premier and his then Deputy Minister put together. I heard about it from a colleague from Smithers who phoned me up during an election campaign and said, "Bill, have you heard about this document that's floating around out there that apparently the Premier has put out there to First Nations, and it's called a new relationship, and it's a done deal." We find out about that actually during an election campaign. No discussion with caucus, nothing.
And I can confirm that one because a copy of that was leaked to me during the campaign, and my copy had a note on it directing the deputy ministers that were involved in it not to discuss it with their cabinet ministers. So they were specifically told, don't tell your ministers, don't tell your caucus members, don't tell anybody about this till after the election's over. So that's when you say it's a pattern, that one I have to confirm.
Well, it's discouraging. It's humiliating. I was a lawyer before I came into this in Cranbrook. I've raised a family. I've owned a business. I ran a business, a successful business. I started when I was 27 years old. I didn't have to do this. I was, I thought that I was needed. I came into public life because I frankly don't care much for the NDP way of governing, and nobody else seemed to want to do it up in the area in the East Kootenay, and so I said, well, I guess if nobody else is going to do it, I'll do it. And frankly, I got elected in 2001 when anybody could have gotten elected. I mean, you could have run a goat in my riding. Some people might say they did, but it's true. I mean, but let me finish because this is important. Guys like me got elected in 2001. I wouldn't have gotten elected any other time but 2001 because I'm too blunt and maybe I'm too honest.
Okay, I'm going to get you to go on one more thing that was blunt. You, in the scrum this afternoon, referred to the government caucus as being victims of what you call like a battered wife syndrome, and I gather you want to clarify what you meant about that, and I would appreciate it if you did.
Sure. Well, it's been a very emotional day, and I was trying to find a way to describe the psychology of cabinet and caucus. It is it's a bunker mentality where we all feel like we're being attacked and we have to band together, and it's like the Alamo a little bit. And I hope it doesn't turn out to be like the Alamo. But
you also said you described the Premier as bullying. You said he operates by intimidation. You said he yells at people. I mean, you suggested that this guy is pretty intimidating.
He can be very intimidating, and I certainly don't back off at all from my comments about there being that kind of repressive psychology in the caucus and cabinet. Wrong choice of words because I think so. I mean, I wish I'd have found a better way. I still can't find a better way to describe the sense that's there. And everybody will go to war on this, I know, and they'll defend him and say that it isn't so. But
you said you've seen it again and again and again.
I have seen it again and again and again. He loses it with people, and he berates people at cabinet meetings and caucus meetings, and unfortunately, he has a tendency to do it a lot of times to people who maybe aren't as well equipped to fight back. and doesn't do it so much to folks who can fight back. There have been